Please pray with me. May these words that I speak be grounded in my soul, encouraged by the God presence in me. And may these words that you hear be captured by your soul, enlivened by the God presence in you. Amen. I meant to say during that preamble that there are copies of that preamble along with the sermon at the back. So if you want to have that for reference, you're welcome to take one. And we'll be offering them as people join us each week, so that I don't have to do it every Sunday for your benefit as well as mine. We have just heard read Mark's prologue, the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ. Mark affirms that Jesus is the Messiah, the promised one that they have waited for so long. And in this affirmation, Mark is also saying that Jesus was born a regular human being, grew up a regular human being, and in adulthood became the promised or special child of God. The central theme of Mark is the way. And this is a story about the way of God, the way of Jesus, and what it means to be followers of the way. And I wonder how many of you have pondered at some point in your lifetime the way of God in a way that changed your life. I remember looking for the way when I was in my teens. It was a very difficult time for me as I struggled with all the normal teen issues of image and acceptance. But I had the deeper, more depressing edge of not being able to be myself. As a closeted gay teen in a very homophobic world, I was looking for a way in or a way out. I was an outcast amongst my peers because they labeled me as gay as hard as I tried to deny it myself. I hated myself, and I hated God for making me this way. The self-hate and the depression that accompanied it would rule my life for the next 15 years. Even my church community seemed shallow because I felt I had to act normal, act straight, to be accepted there as well. And then, as I entered my 30s, I found myself on a spiritual quest. I don't even know that I named it at the time. It's looking back that I knew it was a spiritual quest. Beginning theological studies, and there I had a conversion experience. I found a community that loved me more when I dropped the pretense of being straight and began to live who I was meant to be. I found myself, and I found God. And eventually, I began to love both. When I read about Jesus in Mark's prologue, I realized that Jesus is looking for the way. He becomes a spiritual seeker and embarks on a religious quest. In his late 20s or early 30s, he leaves his place of birth, Nazareth, and leaves his friends and family behind to become a follower of John the Baptizer. Something led him to leave his conventional life, the expected way, to become a follower. And he has a conversion experience. William James, a 19th century American philosopher and psychologist, describes a conversion experience in, for me, what is a very helpful way. And he says this: conversion need not refer to changing from one religion to another, or from being non-religious to religious. It may also refer to a process, sudden or gradual, whereby religious impulses and energies become central to one's life. So where spiritual impulse and energy becomes central to one's life. This, it would seem, is what happened to Jesus in a really big way. Marcus Borg, a well-known biblical scholar, says, "It is reasonable to suppose that Jesus experienced such an internal transformation, which led him to undertake the ministry that he did, and that probably had something to do with John." There is no doubt that Jesus' relationship with John is important. All four Gospels begin the story of Jesus' adult activity with a story about John. That is significant. In fact, in both Matthew and Luke, Jesus says, "There is no one born of woman greater than John." That's pretty high praise. And Mark continues his prologue by saying that Jesus' ministry begins after John is arrested. Jesus steps in to carry on. At Bible study this last week, we talked at one point about the reality of becoming aware of injustice. Once we know something to be unjust or unfair, there is no going back. Or if we do, we go back with a whole lot of bad feeling about it. We talked, for example, about how we've all been changed by the women's movement, that once we became aware that women are not lesser beings, we could not go back to treating them as such. I wish that was universal, however. The same has become true for racial and ethnic differences, and also in the way we honor and respect children. The not being able to go back to a way that is unjust became clear at the study when I shared my own experience in our culture. It is relatively safe for me to be gay in our society, although there are times when I too am fearful. But the reality is, if our country was to suddenly impose laws against being gay, as has happened in Russia, I could not go back to pretending to be straight, as I did through much of my life. I would stand proud, loving who I am, even to death or imprisonment. The alternative is to die inside. A shortened life being who I was meant to be means much more than a longer life of denial and painful death. I believe this is what Jesus discovered on his spiritual quest. Jesus, as a child, as a teen, and a young adult, knew poverty, knew oppression, knew hardship. He was taught by the temple to fear God, and all of those together became life-taking. But his awakening to the power of the Spirit in his time with John showed him that his life had value beyond obedience to a code of law. To live in love rather than in fear is life-giving. Mark is telling us that Jesus discovered the way to God. It was about a personal relationship with God rather than one mediated by the temple. It was about living life following a path of love and compassion rather than fear and indifference. The Spirit of God in Jesus, which is also in each of us, burst into flame. He radiated the very presence of God when he embraced the very essence of his own humanity. To be true to yourself and to love yourself for who you are, so that you might in turn love others. This is the way to God. Also at Bible study this past week, I said that I now feel blessed to be gay. As hard as life has been, it has also helped me to see what it is to be marginalized. Perhaps I have had to work hard at loving myself. Perhaps harder than those who have felt normal in our society and community. But I have also come to know great joy by pressing on in my own spiritual quest, and I have found at least the beginning of my way to God. And frankly, folks, none of us are normal. None of us are normal. We all have our shadows. We all have our challenges that make us feel less than whole. We may lack confidence. We may feel silenced. or inadequate. We may have poor body image, or think we are less intelligent than our neighbor. We may carry tremendous guilt, or be completely unable to forgive. But rather than those being burdens that we hide from or bury, they could be opportunities to find our way to God. Jesus is calling us to search ourselves and to live the truth of who we are, whatever that is. He is asking us to do just what he did, to become a spiritual seeker, so that the Spirit of God that is already within each of us bursts into flame. Jesus calls us to follow him, not in adoration, but imitation. To become fully a child of God, just like he did. This is what Mark was trying to capture in telling us we must become followers of the way. It is in this context that we will go deep into Mark's story of Jesus through the next 14 weeks. We start anew this day at this new place in the road. There is little certainty in the journey before us except that God will be there. Perhaps it is time for the religious impulses and energies to become central in each of our lives. We already know that love, not fear, prevails. And so I invite you to come and follow Jesus, to embrace the good news and really open to life in God as a follower of the way.